Accessorizing.
Sonny, we gotta do it right. We got the right ammo for the job. I wouldn't worry about it. Remember, it's one shot per day range. So guys, last season we did this semi-auto Thompson, one of the West Hurley guns.
Yep.
And you guys made it very clear to us that we had made some mistakes.
Yes, that we made classifications and decisions about things that are intrinsic to the Thompson, regardless if it's a semi-auto or a full auto. We made conclusions like ergonomically, it's horrible to shoot. It feels terrible. Everything about the gun is no good. It's
designed for an actual different race, like not
Yes.
a different human race, but like a different race of creature.
Like there's a species that's got like octopus tentacle arms or something that maybe could make something
that also
useful
has
out
a
of this.
shoulder in a different location.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's just no good, right?
And a center of gravity far above its feet.
It's got a center of gravity that's just built different.
But that's all unique to this gun.
Yeah, apparently this is the only gun that's ever applied to.
Right.
It's just only the semi-auto ones.
And it's specifically the West Hurley.
Yes.
And it's the fact that the bolt is an anteater nose, the fact that the main operating mechanism is actual alchemy.
Yep.
So, and you told us that all of these issues would be alleviated.
We just had to get a real one.
We just had to get a real one. And the fact that we don't have a real one is it shows just how stupid.
Yeah, we're just idiots making stuff up. We're just idiots that are just making stuff up for the internet. It still sucks.
It still sucks.
Guess what? I woke up this morning. It still sucks.
Yeah, check this out. Oh, and look, I think there's a big issue. We're not done accessorizing this. Here,
That's
help
true.
me out here. You guys love this. I was told that Thompson owners love it when you accessorize.
What the Thompson needs is just a couple of modernizations.
Yep, just a little updo.
You should probably clean the grease off the wood, but that's
I wouldn't
okay.
worry about it.
Fun with stickers.
That's the happy side.
And you guys can get these stickers on the websites.
Yeah, on the internet, and I'll put them up. But so yeah, we got a real one. Look, it does the slurp.
Slurp.
It still sucks.
Yeah. So you know we took you guys' feedback and we understood that presumably a lot of you people who we classified as having a protosexual fixation obsession with these guns would refuse to hear reason unless we like put our fingers, you know, because of course we'd both shot full auto Thompsons before this.
Many times.
We had plenty of experience with it, enough experience to say shooting the semi-auto one still has the same issues. Also, these guns' design isn't substantially different. Like the things that are wrong here are also wrong here. And I'm not saying wrong as in like, oh, in retrospect there was a better way to do it. I'm saying at the point in time, anybody who looked at that and said that's a good design is an idiot, is a
Right.
dumb moron.
I'm going to go further, and I'm going to insist now that this remains better to shoot. The semi-automatic one.
The full auto one's not great, and especially if your interest is, and I guess this is something that I want to attribute to pretty much all open bolt guns. It's trickier to do like shoot a good group with an open bolt gun because there's that added element of you have to control the slurp.
Right.
That makes it. I mean, it's more difficult, right? I think I'd be fair in saying it's more difficult than with a closed bolt one. So if you're interested in shooting a nice little group, I think that this is the better shooter.
So, something that gets introduced with the open bolt gun, and I can't wait till you guys are saying, no, it's not a Blish gun! You have to shoot the Blish gun!
Yeah,
Anyway.
that'd make it better.
All of this, so I like open bolt guns. Here, you can take that off. And this is something that Ivan and I disagree on, but I've shot a lot of bolt guns to the point where I've gotten pretty good with them. The thing about the Thompson is you have all of this mass,
Yep.
And by the time of an M1, an appropriate amount of mass for the cartridge, which transitions from completely rear,
The center of gravity is behind your rear hand.
and then once it's forward,
It's forward of your rear hand.
right, because most of the bolt remains ahead of your hand. So this thing jumps, and let's see if we can capture this. it jumps more than, I've seen a Bren gun jump, and that's a much more massive bolt.
And the part of the problem with that is because you're holding some of the weight of the gun with this hand. As that center of gravity changes, you'd have to be like, you have like computer motion stabilization or whatever, right? To be able to like adjust the amount of weight you're supporting with this hand as the nose of the gun suddenly gets heavier.
Right.
And I'm sure from a standpoint of recoil control, that's actually somewhat desirable and is probably doing the gun favors even. But from a standpoint of, like, if you're trying to shoot a good group with it, it's really tricky. It sort of amplifies that problem that people, at least I'll attribute to open bolt guns, where the slurp makes it, you have to hold still the whole time you break the trigger and then some. I guess just getting into it, right? The interior of this gun, very fundamentally just like the other one, right? It's still got this dipshit anteater bolt. The only explanation for why they did this is because they had designed something early on a prototype that was stupid, and there was some idiot at the U.S. Army that was like, yeah, we need those, and they're like, okay.
So, the real reason for some of these choices comes down to the fact that this gun was designed to be a rifle, right?
Yep.
John Douglas MacArthur Thompson III believed in the Blish principle, right?
Yes.
And he thought that he was going to come out.
And of course, his basis for understanding this is kind of hilarious. His his explanation of why he thought that the Blish principle was real is that on battleship guns, or on naval cannons, if you load it with a reduced powder charge, the breech, which is helical, it's a bunch of threads. If you've never seen one, it's a ton of threads and they're all helical. The gun would start to unlock itself a little with a half load, whereas with a full load, it would stay locked up. And he figured that this is dead proof that like the dissimilar metals do a big stick more than what you would predict from the static friction of the thing itself.
Right.
Which is insane and hasn't actually ever been borne out. And nowadays we have the actual physics and the actual capability to test that in the lab. And guess what? It's not real.
Right.
That any perceived difference there probably has a lot more to do with the pressure curve and the difference in how fast it's burning and the difference in dwell, the difference that you have that peak pressure curve. Whereas with the full load, it's going to be a lot sharper, and there's going to be more friction on the breech. Whereas if it's a slow push, it's going to tend to want to unlock it a little bit more. So there's a lot of physics reasons that aren't made up nonsense that would sort of explain what he saw. But he had this insane obsession with then putting the little brass Douglas in the gun that it turns out you could take out of the gun. And when you took that out of the gun and replaced the Blish lock with just its volume of steel, the gun cycled slower. And now, when we talk about delay in an action, if the delay that you add with a more complex mechanism is less than if it was just steel, it's not a delaying mechanism. It's an advancing. It becomes a booster, right? It's a recoil booster at that point. So I think that there's a good argument that the Blish mechanism is closer to being a recoil booster by way of it robs mass from the bolt by necessity in order for it to fit, than if it were just a solid piece of steel.
The other stupid thing about the Thompson down to the, this went up to the A1, is that it's technically hammer fired. So you have this trip which is called the hammer, and when this hits into the front of the receiver, that's what actually accelerates your firing pin.
Which is it's incredibly stupid, right? Because everybody's familiar, right, with normally with closed bolt pistol caliber stuff. The firing pin is just permanently affixed and sticks out the front of the bolt.
Right.
And that's then what touches off your cartridge. This introduces a load of problems. Notably, one we even ran into, we had to sort of battle, where headspace matters with this gun because.
This is Editor Matt. I've come in afterwards, and as I'm reviewing this, I see that some of you might react to something Ivan said, and he's pointing out that the Thompson headspace matters, right, whereas otherwise might not in a open bolt subgun. And I, just to get ahead of some of you who might say, oh, headspace always matters, blah, 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 you don't know what you're talking about. Well, let me point out what he's trying to talk about. When we think about headspace, usually we're thinking about it in terms of a locked breech firearm, right? So this is a Krag action. The bolt locks at a fixed point, and then we have the head space at the case head, right? The amount of free space between the back of the cartridge case and the bolt face itself. On locked breech actions, this really matters, right? Because your bolt is going to lock up against that fixed datum every single time, no matter what you do. And so when there's too much headspace, you can have a lot of problems, blown out cases, etc. It still matters in a submachine gun, but let's point out the differences real quick. So here in my advanced CAD software, we've got the Thompson action, and we've also got a more traditional submachine gun action here. So the Thompson action, again, we have the hammer-fired anteater nose bullshit. Whereas ordinarily, see, like this on this prototype MP5, right, which is a straight tube blowback open bolt gun, it just goes straight back and forward. It pushes the cartridge into the chamber, and the cartridge is set off by the case ultimately being fully chambered, and only once that case is fully chambered against the case mouth and thus fully supported will it set off the round. And so you're able to set off the round by the bolt just doing as it does, traveling forward in a linear fashion. The only thing that's going to stop the bolt is the case ultimately getting into battery and physically stopping it in ordinary operation. So you could even have a slightly short case. Your bolt is going to be able to make up for that because it is just traveling in a linear tube. The Thompson, on the other hand, with the introduction of the hammer, sets up this fixed point where the bolt mass is going to tend to want to stop and begin engaging the firing pin. So whereas on a traditional open bolt subgun, it only matters that your headspace is a theoretically negative number, right? Suffice to say, if there was no cartridge in the chamber, the bolt would be able to travel beyond the point of where an ordinary case head would sit. In the Thompson, it matters for the distance of this shoulder to the mouth of the chamber. So you all of a sudden have a critical headspace dimension here. Whereas in an ordinary subgun, while out of batteries do happen, they're less likely to happen because the firing pin will not be hitting up against the cartridge if it is not fully seated with full authority. In the Thompson, you have a point where if by some debris or other error, your bolt stops and engages the hammer earlier than it should, the firing pin, which is then inertial, can continue traveling forward and set it off out of battery. So it complicates the situation. Whereas here, you only need to know that your barrel is fully chambered and that your bolt is capable of fully traveling in order to have safe headspace. With the Thompson, you wind up having to worry about not only negative headspace, but positive headspace as well.
Headspace matters with this gun because once this bottoms out on the receiver, it's trying to stick that firing pin out. If the round hasn't humped all the way over the extractor yet, it's going to be firing sort of in an API capacity,
right.
And so which really just causes you to have a lot of light strikes,
right?
At the end of the day, because this system is somewhat inertial, where the smack that it gets forward gets a little bit of extra firing pin protrusion compared to where it just actually bottoms out. But like headspace becomes important for those of you who aren't gun builders. This massively complicates the amount of work and forethought. Like, you now have to control a datum that is the front of the receiver relative to, really the shoulder of the chamber where the round bottoms out. And this is a threaded barrel, not a pressed one. So now that means that you've got to
time it.
You've got to worry about timing from a standpoint of the way that you accomplish that is moving the shoulder back on the barrel via machining, or you machine on this flat. Either way, it's stupid because the MP18 didn't have a fixed firing pin. It was replaceable, but it functioned like a fixed firing pin.
Right. As with the early MP40s.
They absolutely did understand. Like it's not like it was like impossible for them to understand. A fixed firing pin is a thing and it works and it's good. Their choice to use this dates back to the fact that this gun was adopted as effectively it was adopted as a prototype.
Yeah.
It was adopted as a prototype.
So the reason you have this hammer firing mechanism is probably because they were concerned about out of batteries when it was a rifle caliber, and it mattered more.
Yes.
And so before we go on from the headspace question, I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments who know so much. They're saying, "Oh, headspace always matters. Headspace always matters."
Not.
Well, no. So in an open bolt subgun or even just a direct blowback pistol caliber thing, you really only have to get it to the point where it's what we call negative headspace.
Right, where the round's in the chamber and it closes on it.
Yeah, when the round's in the chamber, there's positive pressure of the bolt face. That's it.
Yep.
With something like this, it's not, to be fair, it's not really headspace. It's more of a hammer space, right? It's the distance between, so you're controlling for three variables. When does the hammer hit? Where is it relative to the chamber? And then also that's it's just stupid.
And there's a French author slash aviator who dabbled in designing of things, and his last name was Saint-Exupéry, which I assume is close to the French the pronunciation of it.
Yeah, we talk about him a little bit in the 4956 episode.
He's a fascinatingly interesting guy, and his most favorite quote, one of mine, in fact, I've got it written down, is, "A designer knows he has achieved perfection, not when there's nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." The Thompson, from its very inception, failed that test colossally, and every step along its evolution, it continues to fail that test. And here's the funny thing, right? It's not until World War II wartime production that not a company that owns the design, right? A company that's contracted to manufacture the guns, Savage, is the one who gets it closer to passing the Exupéry test, where they remove the bush lock because they realize it doesn't do anything. In fact, it's more of a liability than anything. This is an M1 bolt. For the M1A1, they eventually get rid of the hammer fire thing and give it a fixed firing pin. Massive succeeding in the Saint-Exupéry test because it gets better, right? It's simpler, cheaper, easier to manufacture. You don't have to worry about barrel timing. You don't have to worry about sort of like the subgun equivalent of headspace. You save so much in complexity in manufacturing and in what can go wrong in building a gun, right? Savage fixed all of that. It's just mind-boggling, and of course, Savage then switched it to a pressed-on front sight instead of a threaded-on front sight. Why, oh God, why a non-adjustable sight SMG had a threaded front sight? Mind-boggling to me, right? They understood press fits. That wasn't something they didn't understand.
And it was an incredibly fine thread too.
Yeah, and so they put an incredibly fine threaded front sight on the gun. Why? Because whenever Thompson originally designed this thing, it was the most bogus failure of the Saint-Exupéry test. Like, I don't think they could have made it much worse. And again, right, we talked about most of this before. If you're vibing with what we're saying, go watch the previous video, because we touch much more on like the piece-wise, why would this be machined this way?
Right.
I mean, if we want to dabble a little bit more into affordance, the way this gun takes apart is stupid.
Yeah.
Like, you've got the little clip that you have to push up at the end and then take the gun apart. That's a really stupid design.
Oh, there's also a really funny thing that we didn't notice until we were shooting it. So, open bolt subguns, right? They there's a volume of air back here, and when it's traveling back, it's compressing it. Well, no, all guns have this, right?
Yeah.
Like the AR, the bolt won't go all the way back if you don't have the weep hole.
Or it'll make a funny sound, and then what the problem they specifically ran into is if there isn't the weep hole, the combination of air and a little bit of water in there can cause damage to parts.
Right.
It can cause short cycling. It can cause all sorts of trouble.
Well, all that to say is they put the weep hole on the Thompson behind the rear sight.
Right next to your eye.
Literally, while you are firing the gun, and we didn't notice this. Does the semi-auto one have one? It does.
It does.
We didn't notice it on the semi one, probably because of a lesser volume of air being compressed due to only shooting one at a time. So I will say, after 5 rounds, I was able to get my eyes open.
Yeah. Of course, maybe on the semi-auto gun, the bolt isn't capable of bottoming out, because on the
full auto one, it has to bottom out.
On the full auto gun, it bottoms out completely against that little recoil pad.
The leather piece, which is funny. A leather sandwich between 2 pieces of steel, which I'm sure is doing plenty. So the effect of that was, and we're both pretty good at shooting full auto. It was unbelievably difficult to keep your eyes open.
Even with shooting glasses, you can feel. I mean, so
it would shoot. It was pissing gas under my glasses.
Right. I would classify this as it was like shooting a 10-inch AR from a standpoint of like thump, 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 thump. You're getting thumped, but 45 is not loud. From a 10-inch barrel, it's really pretty mild. Like it's from a 16-inch barrel, 45 gets to the point that it's like barely rings your hearing. Like if you've shot 16-inch 22s without hearing protection, 45 without 16-inch barrel without hearing protection is fine. So 45 is pretty quiet by the time it gets out of a 10-inch barrel. This thing felt like it was thumping you like a 10-inch AR because it's crapping gas right into your face. And any oil, any lubricant you've got in that gun, it's coming out with that gas into your face and into your shooting glasses and all over your... It's bad.
Totally oiled up our faces.
Yep.
And then, we were saying, like, we almost wish we could try shooting it without eye protection.
Yeah.
Because there is no way. There's no way that back in the day, guys were shooting these and keeping their eyes open. Like, just... Because it pisses right into your eye.
It's flicking oil and grease and whatever else you put on the inside of that gun into your eye.
Yeah. This isn't a minor, like, every once in a while thing. It's a stream of gas as you're firing. It's
mind-boggling to me that with as much complexity as they built into these guns, Okay, so let's say the wheat port has to be there. Why isn't it drilled at an angle so that it pushes it towards the sight, away from the shooter? Why? I mean, because straight up in the air, it's coming at you.
Right.
You could have angled it forward. You could have put it on the side of the gun. Put it on both sides of the gun. Or how about this? Right. You don't have this dipshit, stupid lower design that hermetically seals the rear end of your receiver. Yeah. Because if you look at something like an MP5, right, it doesn't need a hole to weep gas out of, despite the fact that it's got a very similar thing. Mm-hmm. But there's enough room for gas to escape because the receiver doesn't need to be sealed up for airtightness.
Yeah.
And people are going to start talking about stuff that Carl from InRange says, where having a sealed system's good, it makes it more reliable. There's a difference between sealed to keep sand out,
right, and
sealed as in, you could, if there was an alien zombie virus, you could breathe through your Thompson receiver and be okay because it's got good air on the inside that it traps.
Oh man! So yeah, guys, it's and the funny thing is, we went into this hating the Thompson and then having much more hands-on experience with our own one
and tuning it and getting it happy and everything good.
Yeah.
I still hate it.
I hate it more.
I think I came away hating it more.
I hate it a lot more. A lot more.
And there have been several guns that, in nursing them into running right and nice and stuff, I've come to appreciate why they had trouble in the first place.
Right.
Every step along the way, I'm just cursing the Thompson.
And the gun was kicking and screaming the whole way. Yeah. It did not want... Anyway, guys...
Let's talk about the shooting feeling, right?
The shooting feeling, right? So yeah.
Since last time I had shot, I've shot a full auto Thompson some time ago, right? That's where most of my experience was early experience shooting full autos with the Thompson. Since then, I've shot a G3 on full auto. I think they're very comparable. I think the G3 feels like a Thompson to shoot on full auto.
I agree, especially when you take into consideration that what it does to your vision. What
right, the edges of your vision go away, and it's just I'm pointing this in a direction now. Whereas stuff that's a little bit.
It's not because of the recoil or the noise or anything. Right. It's because it's pissing in your eye.
And things that are a little bit more, guns that are more punctuated, more violently cycling, sort of become hard to pull back down and get it back on target. Whereas something that's in comparison, a pussycat like an MP5 or a 20-inch AR,
right?
By 3 rounds, you're back down onto the target. With the Thompson, it felt like after 7 rounds, it stopped rising.
Yeah.
And if I tried to pull down, I'm pulling it way down.
Yeah.
You're not able to fight a sort of constant recoil stream because the gun's trying to go constantly.
Yeah, and I'm sure your grandpappy could take apart a Thompson in 3 1/4 seconds.
I'm sure your grandpapper who put 20 rounds to a Thompson once in World War II and said it was the best gun ever, and he liked it a lot because of Iwo Jima, where he didn't see combat. I'm sure he loved it. I'm sure he thought it was great.
Yeah, so the shooting experience is weird, because I will say I like the rate of fire. I like the staccato of it. It is fun to shoot.
Oh my god! When it comes to fun to shoot, again, I put it up there with a G3. Where you're not going to hit anything.
Right.
You know it's not going to. It sure ain't no MP5, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Because you're putting hatred in the direction of that you intend, but
right.
Because this is something that we sort of were musing while we were shooting, is that when you think about military use of submachine guns, they're not interested in shooting a group. That's why they don't care about the Schlorp, right? They're interested in shooting a pattern. Really, it's how many rounds can you keep on a man-sized target at 25, or if it's a good one, 50 yards. With the Thompson, it's if you're shooting for 50% accuracy on a man-sized target, what's the yardage you can get to where you can just hold down the trigger and not really have to think about it? I think with the Thompson, it's 10 yards, maybe.
Right?
Maybe even inside of that.
Yep. And the weird thing is like you said. Every full auto gun has a rhythm where once you get to that, you can just drill.
I don't think the Thompson ever. It settles.
No, it did. But it was. I think it did, and I think it was 7 rounds.
Yeah, it was once you're into it.
So you're starting, and you can hold it as good as you want. It's going up and left.
Yep.
And we have targets where we tried to put 5 shots, and we were choking it. And Ivan, I was impressed. He actually made me feel like a little girl. But it turns out it was because he actually put his whole body over his toes.
If you watch the Army training manuals for the Thompson, they say that you're supposed to put your body weight as far forward as you can and really lean into it and really go for it. And so I did that. I bared down on as hard as I could. Yeah. I had a nice rip where the gun didn't climb. The gun climbed.
Yeah.
And then all the rounds I shot was over the target. But once they were over the target, it was a fairly respectable size that they were sort of landing in. But the thing that I would like to harp on there is if doctrinally the way that you shoot your submachine gun on full auto is be in a perfect, like you be in the submachine gun equivalent of a target shooting stance. Like if your military use for a handgun was, oh, it's accurate and comfortable to shoot, you just have to sit in that little hand on your hip sort of sassy stance to shoot it. Or here's how you shoot your military rifle really good. You have to shoot it like a target rifle or else it will maim you. Right? That's not a good gun, right? No. That's a fundamental failing. If they have to, it's like a software patch on the soldier side to make up for a gun's hardware issue.
Right.
Shouldn't be.
But and that's not even an acceptable patch. It's contort your body in a bizarre way so that you can maybe hose it a little bit.
Like if you were in cover, you can't do that.
No.
If you were crouched, you really can't do that. It's going to roll you over.
Yeah.
If you were prone, you can't shoot a Thompson prone. Don't even try. The things like this high, monopotting off the mag, bad.
Right. So yeah, it's. And people say, oh well, for its time, bullshit. At the time, like at that. People are saying, oh, well, the MP-18 only technically predated it because Thompson was working with what he believed to be magic in his little factory where he thought he was going to make a rifle and then it wouldn't fucking work. And so then he, at any point before adoption, so like, putting Thompson aside, yeah, he can live in his little vacuum and design his thing. The military had access
to an MP. Like, the military certainly saw that submachine guns don't have to be god-awful.
Yeah. And they could have tendered, they could have requested a writer, and some people are saying, oh, well, it was the only one. Okay. They could have put out a tender.
Right.
And they had plenty of time to do so, in fact.
Right. And so I mean, I think what you're getting to is the failure isn't necessarily on the gun entirely itself. The U.S. military, saw what happened, and I guess they repeated this lesson after World War II. They saw what happened in World War I.
Yeah.
They knew that submachine guns could be devastatingly effective guns. Right. You know what they did about it? They just, sort of sat on their hands, and they're like, I don't know, Colt has a bunch of these guns that they've made. Do we want any?
Yeah.
Sure, we'll get some, whatever. And then they decided to stick with that, and
for an insane amount of time.
They stuck with it for long enough, right? They used 1928 Thompsons into the beginning of World War II. And even in World War II, did they fix the gun? No, they were like, we'll keep using this awful thing. And then they massively scaled up production because they realized submachine guns are actually kind of a nice thing to have. And of course, the M1 carbine ended up taking some of its place.
Right.
I guarantee you they don't make 3 million M1 carbines if this had been an MP-18.
Mm-hmm.
We would have just kept making, we would have made 3 million MP-18.
And we don't necessarily mean the MP-18 because people, ooh, the magazine. Okay, the MP-18 inherited a shitty mag.
If we would have started with the MP-18 and we would have chased Germany and did the 28 and then the 38 and then the 40, we would have had 3 million MP-40s. And I think, from a standpoint of how much fighting did the guys with carbine or submachine guns see?
Right.
It wasn't always the most, but I think a squad of guys that would have otherwise had carbines, if they had MP-40s, I think that's a very, very respectable and formidable amount of firepower, and it is such a better gun than this.
Yes, in so many ways. So it's not excused by timing. It's not excused by anything.
Right, and of course, we're attributing some blame to the gun's design because of the fact that the U.S. Army military has traditionally been very stupid at learning lessons it should have learned.
Right.
And I mean, the cope that they can do in World War I is the U.S. had it easier than everybody in World War I. Where we showed up and the Germans were already starving to death and everybody was already beat up and we're like, cool, we'll take your guns. We'll have a good time. We'll have a good time of things. The U.S. remembers World War I a lot more fondly than everybody else does.
Right.
Because we showed up and then steamrolled an enemy that was basically already beleaguered from fighting the French and British.
Twitching. Yeah.
So, I think because of that, the U.S. didn't have to have learned lessons. But again, after World War II, we did the same thing where we saw, why do we have sights that can be adjusted to 600 yards, beyond 600 yards, 1,100 yards in a grand sight? Why you're not? No, you can't see a man at 1,100 yards with your little peep sights, especially if he's moving. Right? Maybe if he's standing still with his arms out, like he T-poses, shoot me, but. It's there's lessons to be learned every time that you have this thing, and unless you're the Soviets, you can't successfully pull off a transition of guns doctrinally in the middle of a war.
Right.
You have to wait to learn your lessons, but the Soviets can, I guess, break that rule. They'll just change it 3 different times in the middle of the war. Yeah, whatever. We figured out stamping and steel case ammo in the middle of the war. Whatever. It's not that big of a deal. You guys should try it sometime.
Yeah, you can check this out.
They managed to pull off some interesting feats of manufacturing in a somewhat stressful, precarious situation. But generally speaking, you learn those lessons after the war.
Right.
The U.S. military has proven themselves time and time again incapable of learning those lessons until the pedal meets the metal.
Right. Fuck this gay ass gun.
How many do you have left there?
3.
Let me get my video up. Sec. Yep.
The main issue I have, like, I'm never a guy that has an issue keeping his eyes open shooting full auto, but with this pissing air into your eye.
Well, because there's the air vent right there.
Yeah.
It jets oil into your mouth.
Literally, and also your eye. Like,
Yeah.
I could feel it filling my eye,
yeah.
and by the second shot, I have to close it.
It feels like shooting a 10-inch AR with a brake.
It's awful.
Except this thing's like twice. I mean, this thing's as long as a 20-inch AR, and it doesn't have a brake on it. One skipped in.
It's fucking awful.
One went off the ground and in. That's crazy.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
And for you, up right, for me, up left. Very usable. It's very human, the design. And also, take a look at that. All of the center of gravity is behind your hand when the bolts are here. And then watch what happens as you hold it forward. This thing moves more than a Bren gun when you pull the trigger. It's dog shit.
Got some lead hard gas.
We got some. I mean, oh wait, hold on. Sonny, we gotta do it right. We got the right ammo for the job. I wouldn't worry about it. Remember, it's a 1 shot per day range. Fuck this gun.
Fuck this stupid ass gun.
It doesn't like Bubba's Pissin' Huts. But they do go out. And it kind of cocks it back. Almost.
You know, for practically every American service weapon, there's like a shooting group, right? A shooting discipline where they use it for target, like, you know, like long range with 1911s. They've got a thing for. They've got the NRA high power matches where they use, you know, like M16s that weigh 20 pounds and they pretend that that's a service rifle or whatever. How many groups shoot Thompsons for accuracy? None of them. And you know why? Because it doesn't. That's a wild ride. It's fun. I won't deny that it's fun, but
It does have a pleasing cadence to it.
if I had to characterize it, like, you know, I've shot, you know, the Set Me 308, so roller delayed 308 full auto. I think it feels almost identical, from a standpoint of like how much it moves and like the edges of your vision go like I can't concentrate, and that's probably the
the vision change is artificial.
The piss hole pisses in your eye. It's I mean, as soon as you squeeze the trigger.
Yep.
What's that? Ah, feeding trouble.
No, get through the rest. Cool.
I mean, it's not terrible. Like you were saying, where like with an AR, after 3 rounds you can get it down. With this, I think it's like after 7 or 8, it sort of settles at the point it's climbed to as you're pulling down.
Right.
Like getting it back down lower than that, I could feel every time I tried to do that, it was way lower, and then walks its way back up. So it's like 7 rounds into a burst, you totally can control it.
Yeah.
Right.
So all that to say, guys, Thompson, semi-auto, full auto.
It doesn't matter.
It's
a bad gun.
a bad gun.
It's fun.
Fundamentally,
It's fun.
It is fun. I enjoyed shooting it, but it is a fundamentally, critically, at its very core, a failure.
I enjoy shooting Glocks with switches. I think it's great. It's not a good gun. It's not useful. Even with the stock on it, it's still questionable. I don't see this as being much different. Fun, but somewhat useless.
Yeah. Anyway, guys.
Go ahead and let us know how many Japanese your grandpepper lit up on Iwo Jima, and he totally wasn't lying, and he got 4 medals of honor for it. they gave him a Medal of Honor. It's because he hit something with a Thompson.
and also let us know which submodel that we're so stupid for not shooting that one.
Right.
And because that's the one that did it.
What I want is one of the Navy Thompsons, because apparently they got the rate of fire down to 600. With like a super heavy spring and then added mass to the bolt, and there's maybe a different buffer or something, and then people contradict as far as what actually happened. So probably they didn't even shoot 600 rounds per minute, but a Thompson that shot 600 rounds per minute, I'd be interested in trying. Yeah. I still don't think it would be good, but I want to try it.
Yep. All right, guys. Take care.
WWII.
I generated some good ones.
Just have all 4 of them fuckers up. That's so good.